Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Anaya, and welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. Thank you so much for joining me for another conversation with a fascinating woman who is creating change and making a difference in the world. This episode is brought to you by Casco Financial Group in Phoenix, Arizona. And Catherine Scrivano is the president of Casco Financial Group. She started her business to help people create financial strength to achieve their dreams. My guest today is a longtime journalist who you may recognize from CNN, where she serves as a national correspondent. She is also the author of a new children's book that is deeply personal with a very inspiring message and mission. René Marsh, welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. It is so great to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's so great to be here. And I'm so excited to be talking about this book and the mission behind the book.
Well, thank you. I am honored to be able to talk with you about this beautiful children's book that you wrote to honor sweet 2-year-old son, Blake. In April of 2021, Blake lost his battle with brain cancer. First, let me say just how sorry I am for your loss and how much I appreciate you sharing this with your audience and my audience as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So this book you've written, it's called Miracle Workers, Boy versus Beast. As I said, it's just a beautiful story of faith and of hope. And you wrote it not only to honor Blake, but to raise awareness and funding for pediatric cancer research. Before we talk about the book itself and the story and where the proceeds go, which is extremely important, can you tell me a little bit about Blake? From all the videos and the pictures that you've shared about him on social media, he just seems like such a sweet, energetic little boy. Tell me a little bit about his personality.
Oh my goodness. I think most parents feel the same way. Their child is a love that they have never experienced before. It is the deepest, purest type of love. And that is the bond that I had with Blake, who's my first and only child. And he was just, he lit up our home, our family, and really anywhere he was, always smiling. And if you look through, and I'm amazed by it to this day, if you look through all of the photos for Blake, from diagnosis all the way to the end, we have a lot of smiling photos. And that is what helped inspire me throughout all of this, because he had this spirit to him, where he loved to sing, he loved to dance, he loved music, he loved for me to read to him. And he was a jokester, and just, loved to put his finger up his nose just so that I could say, ew, that's so gross. But that was his personality. And he really was just the light of our lives, my husband and I. And he inspires me to this day, but he was your average 2-year-old.
Well, his personality really comes through in what you've been able to share, especially on social media. The laughing, especially, just the sweetest little boy. And he was just 9 months old when he was diagnosed. How did you come to realize that something wasn't right?
So when Blake was born, he was a healthy baby all the way up until that 9-month mark. And then one day it was, and it's no exaggeration to say overnight, we noticed that his eye no longer was aligned. So his left eye, he lost range of motion and couldn't look directly to his left. He could only look forward. So it would give the impression of him being cross-eyed. And we went to bed one night with his eyes perfectly normal. And then the next day they were not. There was some puffiness over his eye. We took him to an emergency room, and we did not leave the hospital after that. I mean, it was from there, it was an MRI, and then, hours later, it was that diagnosis, and then it was brain surgery. And that was the start of our cancer journey with our 9-month-old son.
And you wrote Miracle Workers during the months that you spent at the hospital for Blake's cancer treatments. Can you tell me a little bit about the reaction that Blake had to that treatment?
So Blake was just 9 months when we started chemotherapy for him. And as a mom going into this process, I was very apprehensive and nervous, because here it was, my delicate infant son was about to have these just incredibly strong drugs pumped into his little body. But I was told this is his best chance at survival. And so we moved forward. And after Blake's first round of chemotherapy, he had a near fatal reaction to one of the chemo drugs. His heart rate started to speed up. and fluid started to build around his heart. He was rushed to ICU, and Blake went into cardiac arrest. And so he was on life support, a machine that they call ECMO, and that was doing the work for his heart. And he was in that condition for 6 days. And I would say that was the darkest 6 days of my life. I mean, we didn't sleep, we barely ate, and we were just hoping that things would turn around. And I spent a lot of time in prayer and also continuing to read to Blake, even though I didn't know if he could hear me or not, but if he could, I wanted him to hear his mom's voice so he can maybe feel some comfort that we were there with him. So I continued that tradition of reading to Blake every day, multiple books, even while he was on life support.
Well, and hope and faith plays so much a part in all of this for you. And this book is about hope and faith for every single child. And it involves a boy named Blake. Tell me a little bit about the story itself, because I heard you say in an interview recently that you wrote the kind of children's book that you couldn't find to read to Blake during those difficult moments of his journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pinnacle of all of this, and when I decided to write this book, or at least the seed was planted to write this book, was at that moment when we were in ICU with Blake, and I was reading all of those books to him, like The Wheels on the Bus and Itsy Bitsy Spider. And at night time, I was reading David and Goliath. And I remember that story in the Bible really gave me this sense of hope that even though I'm looking at my son right now, who essentially looks lifeless, we will overcome this moment. And it really shifted my spirit. And I said, I wish I had something like that to read to Blake. And, in the time that I was there, I decided to write what I didn't have at that moment, which is a book that does inspire, that does help children to feel as if, if the situation is tough, you can overcome. And that's exactly what this book is, The Miracle Workers, Boy versus Beast. It's about the power of hope and believing when you're facing some of the toughest challenges. And during that whole time, I thought, maybe if we start teaching our children this sort of lesson a lot earlier in life, kind of like we teach the golden rule, maybe they'll be able to better handle these tough situations that life essentially guarantees all of us.
Mm-hmm. It's such a powerful message. And not only is it a beautiful book with an inspiring message, but it's also so beautifully illustrated. I know you read the book to Blake and he liked it.
Yeah, so before it was printed, I had the digital version of this book, and Blake loved an iPad as well. And he was my first audience, and I got a big smile when he saw the illustrations, and I knew at that point that I probably nailed it. So honestly, if no one else loved this book, that was enough for me, because I still today remember that smile that I saw when he saw the beautiful photos and illustrations in this book.
That is just so priceless. I want to talk a little bit about brain cancer, pediatric brain cancer, because I read that it is the deadliest form of childhood cancer and that 5,000 children are diagnosed with brain tumors each year, but just 4% of the billions spent every year on cancer research focuses on pediatric cancer research. So can you tell me a little bit about why that is and what your fight is to make a change?
Yeah, I didn't know all of these statistics before I was walking this journey myself with my own son. And when you begin to peel back the layers and figure out what the reality is when it comes to pediatric cancer, it's infuriating, but it's also heartbreaking because you realize that funds is how research is possible, and research is how you get to a cure. And so you find yourself in a position like my dear Blake was, where there was no cure for his type of cancer. And so the answer is more funding so that we have more research, so that we have more cures. So part of the reason for this is because the pharmaceutical industry looks at numbers, and it's a numbers game. And the reality is there are a lot more adults who have cancer, and that's way more profitable to develop drugs for a larger market than there are for the smaller market of children who do develop cancer. But that's heartbreaking if you're a parent and you're living this reality of a child with a disease that has no cure or even any substantial research behind it. And really, the children are our future, right? So So what I'm doing now, and the reason why I wrote this book is not just because I wanted to share this message, because, you know, throughout my life experience, I realized how important hope is. And I like to say that hope is the bridge to the other side of what feels insurmountable. So that is something that I want to pass on to people. But the other mission behind this book is to try to help in my own corner of the world this problem that I've discovered through my own personal experience, which is funding for pediatric cancer. So 100% of the proceeds from the sale of this book goes to the Blake Vince Payne Star Fund, which was erected by the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, a great nonprofit doing lots of work in the space of pediatric brain cancer research. And so far, we've donated more than $70,000 to PBTF, Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, as a result of the sale of this book. And we're just going to keep on going. But this is what I'm doing, using my gift and love of writing to try to, in some way, help this problem that I've discovered through my own personal experience.
Well, and you are making a difference. You've already been able to raise so much money, as you mentioned. And is it correct that you've already been able to award a grant?
Yes, so we have awarded 2 grants. The first grant that we awarded on Blake's birthday this year was to St. Jude Children's Hospital. And the second grant that we awarded a few months later was to Sick Kids Toronto. So we've awarded 2 grants so far. They are currently using that funding to essentially look for a cure for the type of cancer that Blake had, which is pineoblastoma. I mean, there's been some work, but there is a long way to go and still so much that doctors don't understand it. And once we find that cure, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue this mission because I know what it feels like as a parent with a child with cancer. And the prognosis is not good. And it's the worst feeling in the world. And it's unfair that a child doesn't get to live out their full life. And that hurts my heart a lot. So I will continue. I have a lifelong commitment to raising funds for this issue.
Well, you're using your platform in such an important way. And as I mentioned, you're a longtime CNN correspondent based in the DC area. And your sister, Michelle, is also an award-winning TV journalist at WJLA in Washington, DC. There must have been such a comfort having family close by during Blake's journey, because that's not always the case for a lot of families.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And we all went through this together. I have a very close, very tight family. And you know, that has been the guiding light for us, which is that we're able to lean on each other. My sister, my mom, my husband, who's there like every day on the days when it just feels really hard. So that has been very critical for me and very much a part of how I've been able to really survive all of this.
And many people, you know, they're so inspired by your courage and your willingness to share your story and Blake's story to help keep other children and families from ever having to experience this loss. Where do you personally draw your strength from? Because I'm sure there are some very difficult days even now.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm very transparent and honest, there are some days where I do not feel strong, and I am not strong. I'm like just having a very rough day. Grief is one of those strange things where you can be okay 1 minute and then literally 5 minutes later, you're not okay. So I still am dealing with that and probably will for a lifetime, because what has happened is unnatural. To lose your child, and then on top of that, to lose your child to cancer and have witnessed what that disease does to your own young child, that stays with you forever. But as far as where I draw my will to keep going, that is purely for my deep love for Blake. And I have no place else to put it other than to do what I'm doing today, which is speak out about this. Try to raise awareness, try to make a difference in my corner of the world. But all of this is just simply an extension of my love of my son. I mean, I wish he could be here so I can do different things like make dinner for him, change him, like play with him. But because I don't have that, I have this. And this is my extension and my continuation of mothering my son, Blake.
Well, it is a wonderful gift for people to give themselves or someone else, knowing they're helping others battling pediatric cancer. There is only one place to buy the book. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. RenéMarsh.com is where you can purchase a copy, and we have tons of information on all the work that we've been doing, and we will continue to update people, because I really look at this as like sort of a crowdsourcing effort. I mean, this book is a wonderful book, no matter what your circumstances. It doesn't have to be that you're going through a cancer diagnosis. It could be something quite simple, because we all have our own difficulties or challenges in life. So the book has a universal message, but people should feel like they're a part of this movement too, because supporting this book, the impact goes far beyond the pages, as evidenced by the donations and the grants that we've been able to give to pediatric brain cancer research. So as a part of my, thank you to people, and as well as this mindset that this truly is like a group effort, we like to put updates, and I expect to have updates soon on the research that we've been funding, but I plan on keeping everyone in the loop so that we can have an accounting for how our efforts and support and dollars are going to work to try to find cures.
Well, I encourage everyone to share the book, but also they can make a donation at any time in Blake's memory at blakestarfund.org, correct?
Yes, that is right. That is right. So you can do that. All of this all goes into the same pot, which is at PBTF, and it will essentially enable us to continue to make these donations and grants, because as you all know, I mean, obviously research is extremely expensive, and this is something that I'm fully aware is years in the making, and that is the case for many cancer or many forms or types of cancer. So I'm really in it for the long haul, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, that is why I want to encourage everyone to follow the Miracle Workers book on Facebook and Instagram, and use the hashtag The Miracle Workers Book on social media. René Marsh, thank you so much, first of all, for taking your time to share yours and Blake's journey with us, with our listeners and our viewers, but also for writing this book. Like you said, it is for every child, and it certainly is making a difference in changing lives.
Thank you so much, and that is my hope. And thank you for spotlighting this book, and thank you for everyone who's already supported. And I realize that obviously one woman cannot do this alone, so I appreciate all who have kind of come under the tent to help on this issue of pediatric cancer.
Well, it takes a village, but one person is making a difference, and you certainly are that person. So thank you for taking us along this journey of making a difference with you, and for sharing again with me. You can learn more about René by going to our website, thewomenseye.com. And I also want to let you know the Women's Eye has 2 books. We're talking about books today. The first is called 20 Women Changemakers. You can shop for it wherever you buy books and at changemakersbook.com. And our newest book, 20 Women Storytellers, it's out now. You can find out more about that at womenstorytellersbook.com. That's going to do it for this episode of the Women's Eye podcast. Thank you again to my guest, René Marsh. I certainly appreciate you sharing all of this with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much for joining me. I'm Catherine Anaya. Until next time, remember, it's the world as we see it.